This opening prayer was written in 2011 by Jack Park as he bridged from a youth program to being a young adult. We don't know which UU church he was affiliated with at the time, but we are grateful that his words have reached us here and now. I am a child of land, sea, and sky. I am blessed by the sun, my father, and the moon, my mother. I am the base clay of my bones and the divine spirit of my breath, the air of my lungs, the earth of my bones, the water of my blood, and the fire of my heart. I am thus blessed from birth to death. We all are. Blessed for, by, and with life. Sing in me, spirit of creation. Sing in me the song of love. Today's service is entitled Luminescence. And I want to give you a little bit of background because I had not heard of this service before, so I'm going to guess that y'all haven't heard of it either. Luminescence, like Chalaka, is a homegrown Unitarian Universalist holiday. In 2006, Rick Camlett, a lay member of the UU congregation of Santa Clarita Valley in California, delivered a sermon that noted that although Unitarian Universalists have developed ways to authentically celebrate holidays that were originated in other faith traditions, we just needed a holiday of our own. The minister at the time, Rick Hoyt, followed up with a sermon of his own and then commissioned the worship team to develop just such a service and celebration. They were at that for a year. And in 2007, the first Luminescence service was observed. Over the years, the service has evolved and changed, but it's still focused on celebrating the unique spirit of our Unitarian Universalist identity. The service is offered in February to correspond with the growing light as we move from the darkness of the winter solstice toward the shared light and dark of the vernal equinox. Today, we offer this Luminescence service based on the text created by the Santa Clarita congregation, but with a few tweaks of our own. We are Unitarian Universalists, after all. So we begin with a story. I want to share with you a story that is by Aesop, or Aesop, depending how you say it. Everyone's correct. And it was a story of the long list of stories that come from that tradition, from the Greeks. This was one that I hadn't heard very often, and it's the story of the sun and the north wind. The sun and the north wind were constantly quarreling, always bickering about who was strongest, and they would test their strength and say, aha, look at that wind, and aha, look at that drought. And they were always quarreling. So one day, would it be a day if it's with the sun? I guess it would. One day, the sun said, let's settle this once and for all. You see that human down there? Do you see that they're wearing a hat and a coat? Whichever one of us can get that human to remove their hat and coat will truly be the strongest. Because they knew that humans are very, stubborn, obstinate, determined, and need to be brought into the conversation before they would willingly take off a hat and coat. So the north wind stepped forward and said, I know how to do this. I'll go first. Prepare to lose this, O sun. That's exactly how Aesop wrote it. And so the north wind began to blow. And as the wind blew, the tails of the coat kind of started to flutter, and the hat started to tip a little. And so the north wind blew some more, confident in the upcoming win. with wind, and blew harder and harder, and the coat almost took off on its own. But the north wind is a chilly wind, and that human wrapped their coat around them even more tightly and pulled the hat down even more firmly. Well, the north wind was rather disappointed in the results, and the sun said, "Step aside, I've got this." And the clouds parted, and the sun shone gently on the human, and after a little while, the human unbuttoned the coat, kind of opened it up a little, and the sun just kept radiating. And after a while, the hat came off, wiping sweat, and ultimately, that human removed their coat and sat under a tree to have shade from the power of the sun, from the source of light. Well, as you know, with all of Aesop's stories, there is a moral. And the moral of this story, which is not as important to the service as the sun and its light, but the moral, which is good for all of us, is that gentle persuasion can be much more effective than force or bluster. Today we light the first of 5 candles, the first candle, which is the source. This first of 5 candles represents the source of light, both the awesome light of a star that powers all that we know on earth and the light that resides within every person in the world. There is a prayer known as the Gayatri that embodies our relationship with this source of light. You who are the source of all power, whose rays illuminate the whole world, illuminate also my heart, that it too can do your work. On a personal level, the source provides the light that gives us spirit, the light that touches others. On a group level, it may show in the creativity and love that emits from a family or from a church. On a spiritual level, we may see the source as the spirit of life, the divine essence behind all things. Together we now offer a source prayer projected up front. Please read with me. In this season and in all to come, may I honor the source of light which resides within me and within all that is.
So easy to place people in boxes, drawing lines, creating sides. There's us, and then there's them. Those we feel comfortable around, and those we don't. There are those of us with many chapters, and those of us who are just starting our stories. There's the well-to-do, and those doing what they can. There are those we share something with, and those we don't seem to share anything at all. Thank you for volunteering to participate today. More to the point, allowing me to recruit you. I'm going to ask a series of questions, and with each question, those whose answer is yes, that's me, will move to the center of the chancel. So out of your box and into the center. Who here was or is the class clown? So do something funny. No. You could go back to your box. Yeah. Okay. Maybe I'll get more of this. Who of you loves to dance? Oh, yeah. Yeah. Want to get down a little bit, Fran? You want to play a little ditty and let them dance a little bit? All right. Thank you. It's a little more serious, but I don't think it's so. You have to be careful. Most of these are fully participatory, these exercises, but since we have observers and participants, you have to be a little bit careful about what we ask. So it's tricky. Have you ever saved a life or had your life saved? Thank you. Are you LGBTQ plus or have someone in your family who is LGBTQ plus? Thank you. Other than being at worship service right now, have you engaged in spiritual practice this week alone or with others? Thank you so much. Are you someone who rushes to judgment? I don't know. Thank you. Who here believes that all of our collective experiences help make our church community stronger? So I think we can agree that we are better together and that diversity and commonality sometimes coexist, and that is all good. Thank you all very much. We light the second candle, which is for recognition. We light the second candle with the flame from the first. This second candle reminds us of what happens when light shines through a prism. It reveals all the individual colors that make up the entirety of light. We don't always perceive all the colors, but they are always there. The prism candle represents the diversity, sometimes seen and sometimes not, in all that we experience, and encourages us to realize that it is precisely this diversity which gives strength to the totality, to the single integrated community of all life. Together we now offer the prayer for recognition, projected up front. In this season and in all to come, may I discern and celebrate the nuances of color, shape, and perspective that comprise the light, which resides within me and within all that is. Having honored the source of light and the light within and among us, we pause to give expression to the gratitude we feel. We do this through an act of generosity. Let there be an offering to sustain and strengthen this place which is sacred to so many of us, a community of memory and of hope. We are now the keepers of the dream.
We now light the third candle, which is for reflection. The third candle represents light's reflection as from a mirror. We look in the mirror and we see ourselves revealed. I know I've brought this out a few times over the years. This is the sacred mirror, where sometimes the things we see are the things that we hoped we could keep hidden. But we see ourselves more truly when we look at that sacred mirror in the light of that reflection. This candle reminds us that it's important to take in what the mirror shows us, to take an inventory, to shine the light on who we are and who we'd like to be. We take joy in all that we have accomplished. We put our disappointments and mistakes behind us. We ask how our spirits are faring and how our behaviors are affecting others. We intentionally cast our gaze on the important things that we are sometimes too busy to look at. Taken in a larger perspective, this candle reminds us of our ongoing need to explore and study and try our best to understand the nature of the world and our place in it. This candle calls us to reflect deeply on our very being. Taken in a larger perspective, we remind ourselves of the need to see the world as it is and to try to best understand why. So this candle reminds us of our need to study and understand what is. Together, we now offer the prayer for reflection for this third candle. In this season and in all to come, may I reflect deeply upon all that is, in understanding of the light which resides within me and within all that is. We pause to reflect not only on the light and on our own journey, but in this time of reflection, we consider the journey of those among us, those who are part of our enlarging circle of inclusion. Today, we lift up the joys, the cares, and concerns of those within our various circles. We think of Don and Sue Sherman, Jessa and Yvonne Stocker, Al Schuster, the Grote family, Joe and Elaine Cusker, and we have a great report. Joe is doing amazingly well as he heals, and they are so grateful for the cards and calls and all of it. And who knows? We might see him soon. We think of Carol Joyce, Catherine Schakowsky, Jackie Senders, Kim Byam and Ron Kanazi, Rosalie Riforgiato. We think of Don and Diane Tucker and their family. These and so many others, let's pause and include them in our circle of care and compassion and hold them in light. We'll enter the silence and then move directly into singing. We're going to have a story that's been turned into a play. So players, come on up. And now, the narrator.
There was a great kingdom, known throughout all the lands for its splendor, its magnificent buildings, its great terraced gardens and bountiful farms. But through time, all that had changed. Now the once great buildings were falling down and in need of much repair. The farms were now small and did not grow enough food for the kingdom. The poor villagers would oftentimes go to bed hungry. The people of this kingdom were not just poor by way of things, but they were poor of spirit, for there was not much joy in the village. Worst of all, the people had forgotten why their kingdom was once great. The queen of this land did not look as you might expect a queen to look, for she did not have a magnificent throne or flowing robes or a golden crown inlaid with precious gems. She was the king of a poor kingdom, so she looked quite ordinary and poor herself. Her castle was always cold and in need of repair. She had but one manservant and one milkmaid. She didn't entertain the kings of other lands or queens, for she was greatly ashamed of her kingdom. To the east of this unhappy land was a beautiful kingdom with great farms and glorious cathedrals and castles. There were lovely gardens adorned with fine sculptures and sparkling fountains. Night and day, the breeze from city walls carried the most exquisite music and the enticing sense of perfume, as well as the smell of delicacies, for there was an abundance of food in the land. It made the people even more unhappy to look on the wealth of their neighbors, for despite their poverty, the people prided themselves on having once been a great kingdom. The queen did not often leave her castle, for she was weary of the complaints of her subjects. One day, as she sat down to a meager dinner of bread, a slab of cheese, and boiled mutton, there came a knock at the castle door. The queen's servant opened the door to find an old woman with a large oak walking stick. She was carrying a leather canister from which hung from his shoulder by rawhide thongs.
Hail! I am but passing through your kingdom to the village to the east, and I'm looking for an inn to spend the night.
This is not an inn. This is the king's castle.
This is not much of a castle. Still, I'm weary from my journey, and I would like to rest here.
The servant led the old man down a dark, cold hallway to the queen's dining room. The queen looked up from her meal as the woman entered.
You the king of this land?
I am.
You don't look like a queen.
I am the queen of a poor kingdom. Our farms do not grow. Our buildings are falling down, and my people weary me day and night with their complaints. We were once a great kingdom, but that has all changed.
Why don't you just change back?
Change back? We have tried only to fail. We lack all knowledge of what made this kingdom great.
You lack but one thing, and if you will give me supper and lodging for the night, I will on the morrow show you why you fail.
The queen looked at her thoughtfully, motioning to the platters of bread, cheese, and meat, and said,
Eat your fill.
That night, as the queen lay in her bed, she wondered if the stranger had tricked her. The next morning, the old woman came to the queen in his throne room.
You have lived up to your part of the bargain, and now I'll live up to mine. Follow me.
The queen followed the old woman to the castle balcony. There the old woman brought out a long round canister and pulled it from a brass tube with a sewn leather cover, a spyglass. She raised the spyglass to her eye and looked out over the land until a smile crossed her face. Then she handed the spyglass to the queen.
Look hither.
The queen looked out through the glass. She could see great farms and gardens, magnificent castles and cathedrals. She lowered the spyglass and said impatiently,
I have seen wonders of the Eastern Kingdom. I hear far too much of them.
You are mistaken. It's your own kingdom you see.
The queen again raised the spyglass. This time, she recognized the hills and glens of her own kingdom. But where there had been barren pasture, there were now fields of grain stretching as far as the eye could see. Her own people were in the fields, their wagons overflowing with their harvest.
You are a wizard. It's a trick of the glass.
It's no trick.
But when the queen put down the glass, her kingdom looked the same as before.
Nothing has changed.
No, change requires work. But first we must see before doing.
What greatness this kingdom holds.
You have seen what might be. Now go and make it so. After 2 harvests, I will return for the spyglass.
The queen on horseback went out to her kingdom. She rode until she came to the edge of a once beautiful garden, now overrun with weeds and thistles. A group of villagers were standing outside its fence. Their children played at their feet in the dirty roadway.
Why do you not use the garden?
It is not fit, sire.
So it is not, but it could be. Look.
One by one, the villagers looked through the tube at the garden. The weeds and thistles were gone, and the lawns were lush and inviting. But when they set down the glass, the garden had returned to its overgrown state.
It is an amusing device, but of no use.
No use indeed. Behold, knave.
And she went to the garden and began to pull the weeds up by her own hand. When the villagers saw what she was doing, they too began to pull up weeds until they had uncovered a large marble statue of an angel, its wings spread, its face looking toward heaven. The people stared at the statue in silent awe. At length, the queen mounted her horse.
You have seen what might be. Now make it so.
The queen rode farther down the road until she came to a farmer sitting on the ground threshing grain with a small flail. She greeted the man and asked him how it was for him. The man glumly replied that he could barely grow enough to feed his family, much less have anything for market. The queen pulled out her spyglass.
You have seen what may be. Now make it so.
Farther down the road, the queen came to a crumbling cathedral. The roof had rotted and fallen in, and it was no longer safe to enter its arched doors. There were tents pitched outside where a small congregation had gathered. The queen rode her horse up to the tent. The friar who stood before the people stopped speaking at her approach. Bless you. When the queen asked why they met in tents and why they didn't rebuild the cathedral, the friar replied that they were few in number and poor.
Have you shown your congregation what could be?
The queen handed the friar the spyglass. The friar looked through it and saw a new cathedral, larger than the decaying building and more elaborate, adorned with beautiful sculptures of saints and cherubs.
You have seen what might be. Now make it so.
Day by day, the queen went out until she had visited all of the people of her kingdom and shown them what might be. Though there were those who would not look through the glass or who refused to believe what they saw, the greater part of the villagers looked with wonder and with hope. As promised, 2 harvests later, the old woman returned to the kingdom. She almost did not recognize the castle, for so greatly had it changed. The scarred wooden door she had once knocked on was new and intricately carved. Beautiful tapestries adorned the now polished marble floors. The castle's once cold chambers were warmed with heat and music, and the queen was attended to a bevy of servants and maids. The queen, dressed in lavish robes of fur and silk, warmly welcomed the old woman.
My friend, I have awaited your return. Look what prosperity your spyglass has brought my people. Let us marry and prepare a great feast in your honor.
You have done well, but I cannot tarry. I have only come for my spyglass, and then I'll be on my way.
In the 2 seasons since you have blessed us with your arrival, we have accumulated much treasure. In exchange for the spyglass, I will trade you all the gold in the royal coffers with men and wagons to carry it to wherever your destination.
You have spoken wisely, for the gift of the spyglass is worth more than all of the gold in the royal coffers and all throughout the land. But keep your gold. You no longer need the spyglass. You can see without it.
How is it possible?
The spyglass is only shown you what you could see if you believed. For it was only faith that you and your people lacked. Faith is the beginning of all journeys. It is by faith that the seed is planted. It is by faith that the foundation is dug. It is by faith that each book is penned and each song has written. Only with faith can we see that which is not, but can be. The eye of faith is greater than the natural eye, for the natural eye sees only a portion of truth. You have seen what might be. Now go and make it so.
And though the old woman and her spyglass were never again seen in the land, the kingdom continued to prosper and became again the great kingdom of old. Yet despite their abundance of food, their beautiful buildings, their lush gardens and majestic cathedrals, it was ever said of the kingdom that their greatest treasure was their faith. We light the fourth candle, which is for refocus. This fourth candle represents light being focused as through a lens. The focusing of light represents our ability to transform things, to bend the arc of the light in the right direction. Once we've seen things as they are, we can then ask how we would like to change them. Through our refocusing of the light, we can work toward creating transformation at all levels. We can change ourselves for the better and improve the lives of others. We can make the world a better place. So the fourth candle reminds us that through refocusing our light, we can uplift others, enhance our communities, and transform the world. Together we now offer the prayer for refocus projected up front. In this season and in all to come, may I be moved to redirect that which is through conscious refocusing of the light which resides within me and within all that is.
We light the fifth candle, which is for recommitment. This fifth candle signifies recommitment that leads to renewal. After we honor our source of light and life, recognizing the diversity within, and within that unity, we reflect on our understanding, our place in it, and refocus on how we'd like to transform ourselves and our world. The fifth candle symbolizes our recommitment to achieving the results that embody our ideals, and in that rededication to creating what we want ourselves and the world to become. We may ask more of ourselves than we will ever achieve, yet there is value in striving to attain our ideals and in knowing that our efforts are linked to the work of both those who have come before us and those who will come after us. This is signified by this final candle being especially tall. It is the high standard that we set. It is also the legacy that outlasts us. We offer a prayer for renewal. In this season and in all to come, may I ever be faithful to the highest good that may be, in honor of the source of light, which resides within me and within all that is. These 5 candles represent concepts that we Unitarian Universalists hold dear. They also express some of the pathways we may follow toward our own spiritual fulfillment. All the candles symbolize the goodness that we want to encompass within ourselves and that we want to promote within our communities or the world and pass along to the world and to future generations. These concepts and pathways are part of Unitarian Universalism. Ours is a living tradition, growing and changing as the needs of the world shift and change. As we tend to the light within us as individuals and among us as a gathered community, we pass the flame to those who will carry the light to future generations. Our church logo is a hand passing the flame, or perhaps it is a hand receiving the flame. Today it is both, as we embolden the next generation to carry the light of truth, the warmth of community, and the fire of commitment.